Thank you, Prabhuji. As Prabhuji mentioned, I was naive then, and I'm still naive now. So, um, I will try to speak a little something on of substance today. I'll share my screen in a second, but I'll start with Mangalacharan prayers. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Nyena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadhati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopeshwa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वञ्चाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So, firstly, I would like to start off by thanking my very senior host, His Grace Gaurakumar Prabhuji, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak a little something of substance on the topic I have chosen for tonight. So, hopefully, you guys can see my screen here.
Yes,
All
bro.
right.
It's clear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So today's topic, I have chosen to speak on the proof of the authenticity of the Vedas, Vedāha Pramāṇam. Now, we all complete actions in our day-to-day lives, whether that be picking up a glass of water or whether that be doing our daily routines. We all perform actions and do so with some kind of belief in those actions. So I may be turning on my shower and I'll expect water to be flowing out of it. Or I might be switching the light and expect the room to be illuminated. And we do all of these activities with a belief in it. And the same should be applied for Krishna consciousness. Now, after reading books, after hearing classes, after attending kirtans, year after year, our intelligence one day asks us, why? Why are we doing all of this? And at that point, dear devotees, we should not hesitate. There should not be a moment in our mind where we are falling to that question. The answer should be crystal clear. And to understand that, we must understand something called Vedic Epistemology. Now, what is Vedic Epistemology? Epistemology is defined by Oxford as the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. So, Vedic epistemology asks us to distinguish our justified belief within Krishna consciousness from the activities that we do in it. And there has been no other acharya that has dived deeper into the topic of Vedic epistemology is our dear Srila Jiva Goswami. Now, Srila Jiva Goswami has talked extensively about this topic of Vedic epistemology in his Shat Sandarbhas. And the one we will be looking at most closely today is the Tattva Sandarbha. Now, this work has been published for 500 years and has never been proven wrong. And on top of that, this work forms the backbone of our Gaudiya philosophy. Dear devotees, the very basis of what we believe in, the very basis of our Gaudiya Parampara system rests in our belief. And our belief is clarified with Srila Jiva Goswami. Now, Srila Jiva Goswami starts by asking us, what sources of knowledge do we use today to acquire information? In order to understand what the absolute source of knowledge, where we are practicing Krishna consciousness from, in order to understand that source of knowledge, we must work our way up. So Srila Jiva Goswami starts by asking us, what forms of knowledge do we use today? Now Srila Jiva Goswami starts off by naming source number one, Pratyaksha. Now Pratyaksha is that knowledge derived from sense perception. Dear devotees, I am looking through the Zoom camera and I can see many of your lovely faces. On top of that, I can feel this desk that is in front of me. I can feel this glass of water and I can see the room around me. That is what Srila Jiva Goswami means by Pratyaksha. That whenever we use our senses to interact with the world around us, that is Pratyaksha. That is using our senses. So now the question arises, can we use this Pratyaksha in order to understand the supreme truth? Srila Jiva Goswami is asking, can we use this same sense perception that we use for interacting with the world around us? Can we use that sense perception to understand the supreme truth? Now, Srila Jiva Goswami answers with no, dear devotees. And he gives us a few reasons why. He starts off with point number one, Brahma. That our current forms of knowledge from the senses, it has one defect in it. And that first defect is those mistakes we make from ignorance. Now, dear devotees, we have all walked at some point of our lives, have walked in a dark setting at night at some point. And let's say we're walking on the side of a road and we see a rope on the side of the road, but our eyes mistake it for a snake. This is what Srila Jiva Goswami means by Brahma, that our senses unknowingly make mistakes by not knowing the complete truth. Now, I know it might be a little less common to see snakes in New York, but here in Texas, we definitely have quite a few. And I can definitely relate to this. So Srila Jiva Goswami is saying that although we may have looked at the same object, our senses made a mistake in identifying that object. So that is problem number one with trying to use our senses, even within this unmaterial world. He points out point number two, Pramāṇam, those mistakes made from inattention. Now, as far as I know, the vast majority of people listening today, or the vast majority of us, have gone through some form of education, whether that be university, whether that be high school level. And during this time, we have all had assignments, exams, all of these things. Now, although the knowledge might have been given to us, although we may have been given books to read, although we may have been given material to cover, although we may have been given lessons to listen to or lectures to listen to, is it still possible for us to score 100 marks all of the times? The simple answer is no. It is not possible to score 100 marks 100% of the times. Why? Because there will be times where there is some inattention when we are reading over those works, or whenever we are listening to a lecture. We may zone out for a little bit, we may skip over a paragraph of reading, and that is what Srila Jiva Goswami means by Pramāṇam. He is saying our senses don't work at 100% capacity all the time. And we are prone to make mistakes because of that. So he starts by saying that our senses are defected by Brahma, those mistakes made from ignorance, and by Pramad, those mistakes made by inattention. However, with these two mistakes, we make those mistakes unknowingly. We may have not realized that the rope that we're looking, or the snake that we thought we were looking at was actually a rope. We may have not realized that we skipped over that paragraph of reading before our exam. But the third kind of mistake, dear devotees, is the mistake that we make knowingly as well. Srila Jiva Goswami says, Vipralipsa, that our senses have the tendency to cheat. Now, studies have found today that the average person may lie or cheat at least once a day. And over the course of our times, at least I can speak for myself, there have been many instances where Vipralipsa has played a role in my life. That is what Srila Jiva Goswami is talking about here, is that our own tendency to cheat ourselves. And Srila Jiva Goswami brings us to point number 4. He says, let's say there is a person that is devoid of Brahma, that does not make mistakes from ignorance. Let's even say there is a person that is devoid of Pramad and does not make mistakes from inattention. Okay, let's hypothetically speaking, let's say you can find one person on this planet who is also devoid of Vipralipsa, mistakes from the tendency to cheat. The fourth point Srila Jiva Goswami makes is the nail in the coffin for any hopes of using pratyaksha, sense perception, beyond this material world. He states, karana partava, that the mistakes that we make from the limitations our senses have are the final point that he makes, that our senses are not perfect. They cannot accomplish everything. That is the fourth defect. Now, let's say we were to take the world's smartest person and put him in a laboratory and give him every single piece of equipment they could imagine and give him 100 years to work through that. Would that person be able to find out the answer to everything? The simple answer is no. Whether we wait that 100 years or not, when we go to ask that person that, did you find out the answer to everything? They'll be like, no, I did not. And we will be like, but we gave you all the equipment you could have asked for. You had a full 100 years in front of you. Still, you couldn't find the answer to everything? And Srila Jiva Goswami is saying no, because this material body comes with attachments to it. One of those attachments is the limitations that our senses have. So Srila Jiva Goswami says that please give up all hopes of using pratyaksha to try to understand the supreme truth. Pratyaksha is not the absolute source of knowledge that we are looking for. Okay, but one might say pratyaksha, sense perception, is not the only source of knowledge that we use. The senses are not the only source of knowledge that we have to understand the world around us. We also use something called anuman, which is knowledge from logic or reasoning. Now, anuman is for that knowledge, that source of knowledge that we cannot use our senses for. We try to create some form of logic, we try to create some form of reasoning to work around these defects. However, there are two problems in anuman in itself. Firstly, logic constantly changes. Is it not true that the way we saw the atom 50 years ago is very different than how we see it today? That is because logic constantly evolves. Whether it be Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, or the theory of cosmic inflation, or the theory of the Big Bang, all of these theories replace some previous theories that used to be accepted. And now that has been refuted. Srila Jiva Goswami is saying that this logic is constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. And that is the first problem with anuman. It fails to provide us a conclusive answer because it is always being refined. Okay, but he also points out that there is point number 2, that every logician in this world falls to the 4 defects. Every logician in this world, being a human, falls to Brahma, ignorance, falls to Pramad, inattention, falls to Vipralipsa, cheating, falls to Karana Paatava, limitations in our senses. And that is why that is why Anuman cannot be used to try to understand something higher than this material platform. Now, finally, he says there is a third main form of obtaining knowledge. Now, in the Vedas, there are 10 total, but Srila Jiva Goswami has boiled it down to 3, the main ones that we use in our day-to-day lives. And the third one, he says, is Shabda, that knowledge we acquire from a trusted source. Now, all of us have seen statistics. Let's say the coronavirus death count that there is in the world. And we look at the number, which is 500,000 plus, and we accept it just by that. We don't go to each person's house knocking on every door asking if a relative has been deceased through coronavirus. We simply accept the facts that are given to us just because they're a trusted source. Oh, this is coming from Johns Hopkins. Oh, this is coming from Harvard. Oh, this is coming from the United States government. This is why I accept this knowledge. But there's also a problem with Shabda Pramāṇam, Srila Jiva Goswami says. He says that the way that knowledge is relayed to us, the way that knowledge comes to us, firstly, that could be incorrect or incomplete, or in itself may be biased. And let's say it is devoid of all three of those things. The source, which is giving us that knowledge, also falls to the 4 defects. So Srila Jiva Goswami is saying that any source of knowledge on this planet falls to Brahma, it falls to Pramad, it falls to Vipralipsa, it falls to Karana Patava. That's what Srila Jiva Goswami is saying here. So now we are left with a bit of a problem. And Srila Jiva Goswami has taken out every single form of knowledge we use today and basically said it's rendered useless when trying to understand the Supreme Truth. He is saying that we cannot use our senses to try to understand the Supreme Truth. We cannot use logic and reasoning to understand the Supreme Truth. We cannot even use these trusted sources that we find on this planet to understand the Supreme Truth. Why? Because they're imperfected by these defects. Srila Jiva Goswami warns us. He says, please do not try to use these imperfected sources of knowledge to try to understand He who is perfect. He says, do not try to use these defected forms of knowledge to understand the Supreme Truth, which is never defected. If these forms of knowledge cannot serve their purpose 100% of the times within this own material universe, what hopes do we have to use those same forms of knowledge to try to understand the Supreme Truth? So that is what Srila Jiva Goswami is saying on the matter of how we obtain knowledge today. Okay, well, that leaves us with a bit of an issue. But Srila Jiva Goswami says, don't worry. Let's start by trying to create a criteria for what that absolute source of knowledge, that source of knowledge which forms the basis of our Gaudiya philosophy today. Let's try to make a criteria that absolute source of knowledge must meet. Well, okay. He starts off by saying that source of knowledge must be anadi siddha. It should be anadi, without a beginning. That it should have always been there in the past, it should be here today, and it should always be there in the future. And doesn't this make sense? If we are looking for an absolute source of knowledge that answers the questions of who are we? What is my purpose in this world? Who created me? There should be a source of knowledge that has witnessed all of that already. So that is what Srila Jiva Goswami means by anadi siddha. That this source of knowledge should be eternal. The wisdom within this knowledge should be eternal, and it should have been there coming from the eternal source himself. So that is what Srila Jiva Goswami is saying by anadi siddha. That the source of knowledge we are looking for, dear devotees, must be eternal. It must be without a beginning. It must have always been there, and it must be able to answer the eternal questions of who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose in this world? That is checklist number 1. That is the first requirement Srila Jiva Goswami has for our absolute source of knowledge that we are looking for. The second one he brings up is Sarva Purusha Paramparasu. That this knowledge must be accessible to all civilizations at all periods of time. Now, we have many belief systems in the world today, which cite that if you do not believe in a certain God, or if you do not believe in a certain belief system today, that you will be punished somehow. Let's say go to hell. That is what many belief systems in the world today say. But then the intelligent person asks, what happens to the people before that belief system was created? Because all these belief systems can be tracked to a certain period in time. So the intelligent person is asking, what happens to all the people that were before that belief system? Also, what happens to all the people that never had access to that belief system in the first place? Are they also punished simply because they did not know of that belief? So Srila Jiva Goswami finds this quite unfair. And he says that it should not be that there were humans, civilizations, there were groups of purushas. Once again, Sarva Purusha Paramparasu means that Sarva Purusha, all of the Purushas, humans, should have had access to this knowledge. It should not be that this knowledge was not accessible by anyone or by certain groups of people. Rather, that this knowledge was accessible by everyone, that this eternal knowledge was accessible by everyone. That is what Srila Jiva Goswami means by Sarva Purusha Paramparasu. That they should have all had the opportunity to learn about the supreme knowledge that we are talking about. And the third point he makes is Sarva Lokik Alokik Jnana Nidan. That the source of knowledge we are looking for should be the root of all lokik, worldly, and alokik, not worldly or transcendental knowledge in this world. Gyan is knowledge. So he is saying that this source of knowledge we are looking for must be the root of all worldly and not worldly or transcendental sources of knowledge that we have on the planet. And that of course makes sense, because if you're going to have a absolute source of knowledge, it should be the root of all other forms of knowledge that we find on this planet. So Srila Jiva Goswami has given us his criteria. He says that it should be that source of knowledge that we are looking for must be anadi siddha. It should be eternal. It should be sarva purusha paramparasu. It should be accessible by all civilizations. And it should be sarva lokik alokik jnana nidan. That it must be the root of all worldly and transcendental knowledge. This is a pretty tough criterion to meet. With the first point alone, anadi siddha, it must be eternal. No ordinary source of knowledge, no ordinary literature could meet anadi siddha. Let alone the other point, sarva purusha paramparasu, must be accessible by all civilizations. Sarva lokika lokik jnana nidan. It must have been the root of all knowledge we find on this planet today. This cannot be any ordinary source of knowledge. But Srila Jiva Goswami says there is hope for every single one of us listening here today. There is still hope. Because there is one source of knowledge, there is one literature that is anadi siddha, which is eternal, that is sarva purusha paramparasu, which is accessible by all civilizations, and which is sarva lokik alokik jnana nidan. That is the root of all worldly and transcendental knowledge. And what may that literature be? Srila Jiva Goswami says, Vedāha Pramāṇam, that the Vedas, Ved, are the absolute source or Pramāṇ of knowledge. He says that the Vedas are anadi siddha, that the Vedas are sarva purusha paramparasu, and that the Vedas are sarva lokik alokik jnana nidan. He's saying that the Vedas are eternal, that they have been accessed by all human beings, that they are the root of all knowledge we find on the planet today. Now, Srila Jiva Goswami knows that we as human beings often do not listen to someone and blindly accept their words. So, Srila Jiva Goswami is ready to defend this claim. We start off by a verse given in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Yo brahmanam vidadhati purvam, yo vai vedamscha prahinoti tasmai, Tam ha devam atma buddhi prakasham mumukshurve sharanam aham prapadye. Seeking liberation, I take refuge in the Lord, the revealer of self-knowledge, who in the beginning created Brahma and delivered the Vedas to him. And it is not like the Vedas were created at this time. What this verse is saying is that the Vedas were eternal with the Supreme Lord. But the Supreme Lord, Lord Narayan, Lord Shri Krishna, gave this knowledge to Lord Brahma. And this kickstarts our parampara system today. And as you can see in the image to your right, Lord Brahma, who is sitting on the lotus flower, is giving that same knowledge to Narad Muni. And this is how our system of disciplic succession, of giving this knowledge from one generation to the next generation to the next generation starts. Now, someone may ask, Srila Jiva Goswami just mentioned that we should not accept anything, any form of knowledge when it comes to the transcendental aspect that comes from a trusted source. He says we should not try to accept anything coming from another source. However, he said that we should not accept any Shabda Praman for our higher source of knowledge. Well, Srila Jiva Goswami clarifies his statement a little bit. He was talking about Porushaya Shabda Praman, which means Purush or a human being's Shabda Praman, because humans are the ones that can fall to the four defects. But what Srila Jiva Goswami is talking about here with the Vedas is Aporushaya Shabda Praman. Aporushaya, that which is not Porushaya, that which comes from a suprahuman source. So knowledge obtained from a superhuman source is Aporushaya Shabda Praman. And there is only one source of knowledge that fits this category, that is the Vedas themselves. So Srila Jiva Goswami has established that the Vedas are Anadi Siddha, that they have come from the Supreme Lord himself at the beginning of this universe's creation and have always been there. It is not like they were created at the time of the universe's creation. They are always eternal with the Lord. Now he moves on to criterion checklist number 2. He goes on to point number 2. Someone might ask, okay, how are the Vedas Sarva Purusha Paramparasu? How were they accessible by all human civilizations? Weren't they only in India? Well, Srila Jiva Goswami says no. Now, in front of you here, you can see images of many civilizations that the world has had. On the left-hand side, you can see an image representing the Mayans, and on the right side, you have the paganistic religions, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Romans, and other religions represented on the right-hand side. Now, all the great civilizations of this world, one might argue that they never had access to the Vedas. They had their own belief systems. So we start off by looking at the commonalities within these civilizations, of which there are 2. The first one is that they all believed in the elements, in the giver of rain, in fire personified, whether that be gone by the name of Zeus for the giver of rain or the sun god Ra for the Egyptians. They all worship the elements in some form or another. That is known today as polytheism. And luckily, we do know where the root of polytheism does come from. That is the Vedas. The Vedas are the root of all polytheism. And one may ask why? Well, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is given just for all of us to understand this point. In the 3rd canto, in the 25th chapter, in the 42nd verse, Madbhayat vati vatoyam surya tapati madbhayat varshat indro dahat agni mrityu charati madbhayat. Lord Krishna is saying that madbhayat vati vatoyam surya tapati madbhayat, that Surya, that the sun god, is subservient to Krishna. He's saying Varshat Indro, that the giver of rain, Lord Indra, is subservient to Krishna. He's saying that Mrityu Chariti Madbhayat, even Death personified, Lord Yamaraj, death himself, is subservient to Krishna. So it is certainly true that the Vedas are the original source of all polytheism. And we can see aspects of that within all of these civilizations. However, there is a second way that the knowledge of the Vedas are within these civilizations. How, one may ask? Well, all of these civilizations also use something called script, that is language. And all languages can be have their roots traced back to the tongue of the Vedas, which is Sanskrit. So the Vedas themselves are spoken in a very specific language called Sanskrit. And that Sanskrit is the root of all other languages. Even today's historians agree on this point. So this is a very important very important point made by Srila Jiva Goswami, that the origin of script itself comes from the Vedas. And all of these civilizations are using script as well. So what to speak of polytheism, script itself also comes from the Vedas, and that is also present within all of these civilizations. Therefore, parts of the Vedas are present within all of these civilizations. Now, granted, over time, they may have been adapted to the circumstances of the time. However, the truth still remains true that the certain parts and certain truths of the Vedas still exist within these civilizations. So Srila Jiva Goswami backs up his claim that the Vedas are Sarva Purusha Paramparasu. They were accessed by all civilizations. Then he moves on to his third point. How are the Vedas Sarvalokik Alokik Jnana Nidhan? How were the Vedas the root of all worldly and not worldly or transcendental knowledge? Well, this is also answered by Srila Jiva Goswami. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavad Mahapuran, in Grantha Raj, we find a very important verse. Ayurvedam dhanurvedam gandharvam vedam atmanaha sthapatyam cha srijad vedam kramat purvadibhir mukhaihi. In Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 3rd canto, in the 12th chapter, in the 38th verse, it is said that he, who they're referring to here, Lord Brahma, because as we saw earlier, Lord Brahma had received the knowledge of the Vedas from Lord Narayan. Lord Brahma created the medical science, military art, musical art, and architectural science all from the Vedas. They all emanated one after another, beginning from the front face. So Lord Brahma himself, he had received this knowledge from Lord Narayan, and from that we find the root to all of our practices today. One might say, how do the Vedas have anything to do with my doctorate degree? Well, Ayurvedam, that Ayurved, or the medicinal science, started from the Vedas. It was stemmed from the Vedas only. Someone might ask, okay, I'm in the army. How does the military have to do anything with the Vedas? Well, Dhanurvedam, that the military science also comes from the Vedas. And someone who is into dance might say, okay, what does the Vedas have to do with anything about me? Well, this verse is saying Gandharvam Vedam, that the musical art also comes from the Vedas. So in this way, the Vedas are the root to all of the knowledge that we find today in this material world. Okay, but someone might ask, okay, that is perhaps not enough. And Srimad Bhagavatam has already said this, but Bhagavad Gita confirms the exact same thing. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mata smritirjnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarve rahameva vedyo vedanta krit veda videva chaham. In chapter 15, text 15 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself, the Supreme Truth himself, is saying, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of Vedas. Krishna points out two very important things in this verse. One, that knowledge itself comes from Krishna. And Krishna is the compiler of Vedanta. So if we put two and two together, not only is the compiler of Vedanta, but that same Vedas that he is the compiler of also is the source of all knowledge in this world. Whether that be material knowledge, whether that be spiritual knowledge. The word knowledge has been used. And that means any knowledge that is within this world. It comes directly from the Vedas. So that is a very important point that Srila Jiva Goswami makes. Now, someone still might say, what does my chemistry notebook have to do anything with the Vedas? What does my chemistry workbook have to do anything with the Vedas? Well, as stated earlier, the Vedas are the origin of all script. The tongue of the Vedas, which is Sanskrit, is the origin of all languages today. And that way, the medium of knowledge that is delivered to you through script, because one needs language in order to read this knowledge or read this information, even the medium in which we receive our knowledge is been given by the Vedas directly. So whether that be the knowledge itself or the medium in which it is given to us, the Vedas play a very important role in all of the knowledge we receive today, whether it's transcendental knowledge, whether it's material knowledge. Now, after all of this, the Vedas once again want to make sure that there is no doubt in our mind that the Vedas come from the absolute source. So in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, a very important point is made. Asya mahato bhutasya nishvasitam etad yad rigvedo yajurvedah samavedo tarvangireshah itihasah puranam itya adina. In 2.4.10 of the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, the same thing is confirmed by the Vedas. O Maitreya, the Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva Vedas, as well as the Itihasas and the Puranas, all manifest from the breathing of the Lord. How amazing is Lord Narayan, who is able by his breathing not only creates universes, but he is also able to create the absolute supreme knowledge that all of the jivas within these universes, all of the souls, living entities within these universes will need to attain him one day. So the Vedas once again confirm that yes, I am Anadi Siddha. I am coming from that supreme source of knowledge, from that supreme truth. Yes, I am Sarva Purusha Paramparasu, that I am accessible to all civilizations. And yes, I am Sarva Lokik Alokik Jnana Nidhan, that I am the root giver. I am the seed giving of knowledge. I am the root of all knowledge that we have present on the planet today. So that is what the Vedas themselves are confirming. Now, it is interesting because Srila Jiva Goswami has used the Vedas to prove points about the Vedas just now. In today's world, that would be known as circular reasoning. And perhaps we might know a much more common example. In today's world, we have the example of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Now, one may try to conclude that the chicken came from the egg. However, an egg must come from a chicken, which also means that the chicken has to come from the egg. And we see that we're stuck in an eternal loop. And the question is never really answered. Well, using the same principle, the same thing is said about the Vedas. The Vedas themselves are claiming themselves as the supreme authority, and therefore we should listen to the Vedas, which are also claiming that they're the supreme authority, and it goes in an endless cycle. So generally, for this reason, circular reasoning is rejected. That why is Srila Jiva Goswami using the Vedas to prove points about the Vedas? Well, the Vedas are the exception to this rule, and one may ask why. Think about this, dear devotees, that if the Vedas required any other source to validate that the Vedas are the absolute source, wouldn't that statement become false in itself? If the Vedas needed another source to validate that the Vedas are the absolute source of knowledge, that source becomes higher than the Vedas automatically, and the statement no longer becomes true. We have a similar exception to circular reasoning in our country today. Now, we all live in, or at least the majority of us, I believe, live in the country of the United States of America. And within this country, we have a president who can give out executive orders. And someone might ask, on whose authority are you giving this executive order? Unless the president himself says that I am the president, recognizes himself as the president, his executive order does not have any power behind it. No matter what anyone else might say, unless the president first accepts that, yes, I am the president, then all the other government officials can say, yes, he is the president. But first, the president must say that himself. Because in the hierarchy of government officials, since the president is the topmost within the country, at least executive order speaking wise, then the president himself must clarify that, yes, I am the president. The same rule is applied for the Vedas. The Vedas, since they are the highest and most absolute literature, they cannot depend on any other source of knowledge telling them that they are the absolute source. They must say themselves that, yes, we are the absolute source of knowledge, so that people such as myself can come and share that knowledge. And the great acharyas can also say, yes, this is factually true. So then the critics try to raise a second point. They try to say that, oh, there was an author to the Vedas. There was an author at some point, and we have simply forgotten. Well, Srila Jiva Goswami has a problem with this argument as well. In fact, it's quite a weak argument because the Vedas themselves are saying that, yes, we come from the absolute source. We're not coming from a human author. And on top of that, we have a parampara system that dates all the way back up to Lord Sri Krishna himself, as you can see in the image to your right. So, this way, we find that the Vedas themselves come from the supreme truth and were not written by a human author. But let's say, hypothetically, that this human author existed. All right? Historians have still yet to give us a name or a time period. But let's say, hypothetically, there is a person who wrote the Vedas. Well, the Vedas today have 4 lakh verses, which is 400,000 verses. And let's say this person had 80 years of their life, of which they work 365 days a year for 80 years. That comes out to 29,200 days. So that individual has to write 400,000 verses of the Vedas within 29,200 days. Now, the Vedas are no ordinary text. Any Vedic scholar today will tell you that just knowing Sanskrit is not enough to read the Vedas. The Vedas have a very particular type of Sanskrit that they are recited in. And that is Vedic Sanskrit, which is much harder to learn than Lokik Sanskrit, the worldly Sanskrit we might know of today. On top of that, the Vedas were compiled in a swara. There was a very particular way they were sung when they were compiled. On top of that, each verse in the Vedas has deep philosophical meaning to it. So all of these combined, a single verse within the Vedas is very hard for a human to compose. The acharyas will go as far as to say impossible. If one looks at the Vedas, the Vedic verses are very hard to compile. And this person that historians are trying to bring up must compile 13 to 14 of those verses a day for 80 years. And those same historians that have provided an estimate of when the Vedas might have been written also say that the lifespan of these human beings were much shorter than what they are today. This simply does not add up. So, the Vedas could not have been written by any human source. And on top of that, within the Vedas themselves, they say, yes, I am coming from that Supreme Lord, that Supreme Truth. which is the seed-giving father, which is the master of the universe. So that is what the Vedas say. However, since the Vedas are very hard for all of us to access today, especially with our time spans and with our busy lives, on top of that, reading 400,000 verses is quite a bit. And on top of that, trying to learn a form of Sanskrit which is very rarely spoken on this language, the Vedas have become very hard for us to access today. So the compiler of the Vedas, Srila Vyasadeva, who is an incarnation of the Lord and who has put the Vedas into a written form that we know of today, he himself has stated that the Puranas and the Itihasas, which are two subsections of the Vedas, are what are recommended to read in today's day and age in order to support the rest of the Vedas. Once again, that is the Puranas and the Itihasas. And luckily, we do have forms of these available to all of us, dear devotees. Of the Puranas, the topmost Purana is the Bhagavad Mahapuran, the greatest of all the Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, the king of all literature. To our left is Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srila Vyasadeva himself has admitted that the essence of all the Vedas are within this one literature alone, Srimad Bhagavatam. And luckily for us, dear devotees, Srila Prabhupada has mercifully given this literature to us in English form, so that all of us who are very busy in our lives have no excuse as to say, oh, I do not know Sanskrit. He has given us the literature and it is available for all of us to read in English form. On top of that, Srila Vyasadeva also made the Itihasas, and one of the Itihasas is Mahabharata. Within the Mahabharata, the best section, which is advised for advancing our spiritual journey, is the Bhagavad Gita. And once again, Srila Prabhupada has given this literature for us in English form to read. So the conclusion for our discussion today is that the Vedas are Vedāha Pramāṇam. However, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are there as the essence to everything we can learn within the Vedas. On top of this, after even hearing all of this, there is a difference between our Sanatan Dharma, which is the duty of our soul lifetime after lifetime, and other belief systems. Whereas other belief systems may say that even if you do not know this knowledge, you will be punished. Lord Shri Krishna is so merciful that even if you know about the Vedas, he still wishes the best for you. Within the Srimad Bhagavatam, Swastyastu Vishwasya Khalan Prasidatam Dhyayantu Bhutani Shivam Mitodhiya Manascha Bhadram Vajata Dadokshaje Avashyatam No Matirapyahetaki. Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th canto, in the 18th chapter, in the 9th text, Srimad Bhagavatam still wishes good for all those who, even after hearing about the Vedas, have chosen to reject them. Srimad Bhagavatam states that may there be good fortune throughout the universe, and may all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti yoga, for by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Shri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of him. The Vedas are saying that even after hearing about us, if you choose that, okay, out of my free will, Krishna still gives us our free will at this point, even after hearing about all this. That is the beautiful thing about Krishna's mercy. He still gives us our free will. And he says, even after that, even after hearing all this, if you still choose to say, okay, I reject the Vedas, I do not want to listen to the Vedas, he still wishes that there is good fortune for these persons, that the envious persons of the Vedas may be pacified. He still wishes good for all of them and still gives blessings. That is what the Vedas are telling us. However, we must be careful not to use this as an excuse. Because one may simply say, okay, Krishna's blessings are with me either way, so let me just reject the Vedas. Let me not listen to them. Well, Lord Shri Krishna was saying that if we chose that out of our free will. However, all the acharyas warn all of us not to do this. Now, there is a very common example that is used for this. Let's say we have committed some crime. We have committed theft, for example, and we go to court and all the evidence suggests that we have committed this theft. And let's say we decide to walk up to the judge and say, I do not believe in the law, so I cannot be punished. Will the law still apply to that person who does not believe in it? Of course it will be. Whether we believe in the law or we don't, the law still applies to us. And the same thing is with the Vedas. Whether we believe in the Vedas or we don't, the knowledge and the law of karma still applies to us. That is the important takeaway that Srila Jiva Goswami says. And he leaves us here in the Tattva Sandarbha. He says, I have said this much. I can only bring you to that path. And now it is your choice whether you accept Vedāha Pramāṇam or you don't. And with that, dear devotees, I would like to thank all of you for your time. In the course of speaking today, I may have made countless mistakes in speaking. I may have said something that was offensive or incorrect, and I would like to ask the forgiveness from all the senior Vaishnavas in the assembly. And I would like to ask their blessing so that I can speak better sometime in the future. And if there was any small thing, such as a verse I recited, a point that I made, or even a syllable that I uttered today, I will kindly offer that to my superiors. It is only by their grace that I can speak in front of all of you today. I am only a medium of which the knowledge I have heard I'm able to share with all of you. Otherwise, I'm not qualified to speak on this. So with that, I'll hand it back to Gaur Kumar Prabhuji to I believe this is the point where there are questions.
Wow. So first of all, thank you so much, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. I really, really liked how you presented. I really liked the wisdom. I liked your articulation skills. I liked how you captured our attention. And most importantly, I liked the humility with which you presented this whole very complex philosophy. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Very, very grateful, Prabhu. Very, very good. I have a couple of questions, but before I ask them, if anybody else has any comments, please feel free to ask Vijay Krishna Prabhu now. Prabhu, do you have some time, Vijay Krishna Prabhu? Another 15, 20 minutes?
Yes, of course, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I'll open it up. You can unmute and speak. Anybody. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Go ahead, Ravi. Thank you, Paul. Hare Krishna, Vijay, Krishna Prabhu, Dandava Pranams. I just like to first echo Kumar Prabhu's praises for you. I'm absolutely blown away and so impressed, not only by your written presentation, but your oral presentation. I cannot believe you're 15 years old. I can even say myself, being much older, I'm not nearly as coherent, persuasive and articulate as you. So I absolutely loved your presentation. And I do hope that you continue to come back to speak with us, just because I learned so much from all that you presented. I have to say, I loved all your Shastra references. I never took a deep dive on the Vedas, and I did have a small technical question, and that was, you had mentioned that your argument, or you're trying to prove that the Vedas weren't written by any normal human being, because there are 400,000 verses, and the person would have to write, I think, 4,000 verses a day, something like that. But I just want to be clear, if I were to use this example, is it the entire Vedic literature that's 400,000 verses? And that includes the four Vedas, the Itihasas, the Puranas, the Upanishads, or what were you actually considering within these 400,000 verses, if you don't mind clarifying?
So firstly, thank you for all the kind words, although I have to say that I do not deserve any of those. Once again, I'm here because of my superiors. As for your question, I did say 17 to 18 verses a day. I may have said 4,000. That is my fault if I did, but it was 17 to 18 verses a day is what it comes out to. So to further this point, so that 400,000 verses that we're talking about includes all the itihasas, the Puranas. These are all parts of the Vedas, all the 4 different breakdown parts of the Vedas. However, what I did not mention in my talk, which I will mention now, is that that 400,000 verse number is pretty misleading, because that is only of the Vedas of which like we have access today. That is only 6%, 5.6% to be more exact, of what the total amount of the Vedas is. And I, of course, can go into the breakdown of that. There are 4 main sections of the Vedas, and each had a 1,800 pieces of literature, not even verses, 1,800 pieces of literature within each one. And let me share my screen for you, if I may. Let me see. All right. Sorry, one second. So this is the breakdown of the Vedas. So the compiler of the Vedas the Vedas in itself had 4,520 separate and individual pieces of literature, of which we only have access to 256 today. So that 400,000 verse number is coming from those 256 pieces of literature. Can you imagine how many verses were within 4,520 pieces of individual literature? We only have access to roughly 5.6% of the Vedas today. So that 400,000 verse number is a little bit misleading, but I loved your question. And yes, that does include the itihasas and the Puranas and all the other references I made. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I love that you had the slide handy as well, perhaps one that you decided to take out of your presentation, but I find it very helpful. And again, it does illustrate just how vast this knowledge is, and the normal human just can't even comprehend or wrap their heads around even just a small fraction of it. But thank you so much. I just want to reiterate again that I hope you come back, and I see you as a teacher. You're so young, but you are so lucid and you're very empowered by Krishna. And it's very clear here. And I can't wait to see how you blossom and how you continue to preach just to the whole, say, congregation. So thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you again soon. Haribo.
Haribo. And please pray for me.
Paul, can you please go next? Thank you.
Vijay. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Just elucidating so many great points about such a complicated subject. It speaks to your parents and your grandparents and all the teachers you've had in your life. And I've never met a more aptly named person. As a teacher, your presentation and your manner of speaking was wonderful to listen to and to hear. And as Tina said, I see great things for you in the future. And I thank you for sharing with us. I do hope you come back. And it was very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Haribo.
Thank you, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. Wonderful session. So I have heard about the Vedic epistemology before as well, but the way you presented it, it really hit hard the point that we need to take out of this. I do have one question, and so there is a general argument that is given that the Vedas are Shrutis and the Puranas and the Itihasas are Smritis. So usually, Mayavadis they give this argument that the Shrutis are the primary, sources of knowledge, and the Smritis are kind of secondary and in a way inferior to the Shrutis. And that's how they try to establish the fact that and Puranas are you can't prove Mayavad using Puranas. It's very difficult to do that. So that's how that is one argument they use in order to remove the take the Puranas out of the way. So I have heard, and of course I was very happy to see that a quotation from one of the Upanishad, I think Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which says that everything, the four Vedas, the Itihasas, the Puranas, everything comes from the mouth of Narayan, Lord Narayan. So is there any more, or rather, is there any other argument, counter argument that we could use to prove that it's not that the two Shruti and Smriti are at a different level in terms of importance, but it's just the mode of teaching that differs? Because in the Shrutis, it's more in terms of codes and so just like we have Morse code when we want to convey some information. I was hearing a lecture of Prabhupada. He says that the Shrutis are like the Morse codes. So you need a lot of interpretation to actually make sense of them. But Smriti is like a friend is sitting with you and teaching you. He's telling you stories to establish points and stuff like that. But even beyond that, is there any stronger counter argument that you can think of that can prove this?
Yes, of course. And as you're right, Mayavadis try to claim that the Vedas, the general form of the Vedas, are somehow superior to the Itihasas and Puranas. Now, Prabhuji, I would like to turn their argument on their head. Okay? And there is one very important place where we can look and prove this. I will be sharing my screen right now. So, sorry, I actually don't have it pulled up. Let me pull it up real quick. So, in the Rig Veda, there is a verse that describes the Lord with 4 horns, 3 feet, 2 heads, 7 hands, bound threefold, and the bull roars saying that the great God has entered the mortals. All right. Now this is a mantra that is found in the 4th mandal of the Rig Veda, and the Mayavadis here will say that this verse in itself is superior somehow to the verses in the Itihasas and the Puranas. So let's look at some of the commentaries written on the Vedas, because the commentaries in the Vedas themselves seem to contradict each other. In Shayana Acharya's Bhashya, he writes that the 4 horns are the 4 Vedas, the 3 feet are the 3 Shavanas, the 2 heads are the Brahmananda, and like that he goes on and he says that the 7 hands are the 7 Vedic meters, and round threefold refers to mantra, Brahmana, and Kalpa, and that this bull is Varshaba because he showers Varshita. So like this is one example that is taken in here. The second one is in Patanjali's commentary of the Mahabhashya, in which Patanjali is the creator of our modern yogic system today, and he's said that the 4 horns are actually the nouns, the verbs, the prefixes, and the indeclinables. The 3 feet are the 3 tenses of past, future, and present. And like that, he concludes that the verse is talking about literature, whereas Shayana's commentary concludes that it's talking about something else. And you see how the commentators on the Vedas contradict themselves. However, the king, we talked about earlier today, how the Srimad Bhagavatam is the king of all the Puranas. Well, dear devotees, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, so that there is no doubt left in our mind about this verse, there is a very important point made. This is coming from Srimad Bhagavatam. Sorry, it's a lot of reference. Let's see. Oh wait, sorry, it's here. Yes. Okay. This is coming straight from Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can see this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 16, Text 31. And in there it says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has 2 heads, 3 legs, 4 horns. And just like that, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a Purana, has given the ultimate commentary on what that verse means. So while the Mayavadi philosophers might be debating amongst themselves that, no, this verse means this verse means that, if they themselves cannot give a conclusive answer on what the verse does, and the Puranas can, that speaks to which is the more authoritative of the 2 different groups of verses.
Beautiful.
So that is the point that the Acharyas make here.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That was amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, for finding that. Anyone else has any comments? Sundar Gopal Prabhu?
Yes. Vijay Krishna, very happy to see you. You may not remember, but for other people on this call, I've seen him since he was 5 years old, running around in his diaper. So for me, it's a very proud moment to watch him giving class this way and quoting verses and making such philosophical arguments. So Vijay Krishna, I'm very, very impressed to just see you speak like this. You're like a big scholar. I especially want to congratulate you on being able to use such clear logic on such a difficult subject, especially philosophy. So your explanation, your sequence was very, very logical. And you were quoting Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami is, a known scholar, and his logic is also, it's not the easiest subject to touch. So I'm very impressed that of everything in our philosophy, you actually went to Jiva Goswami. So I'm just super impressed. So I just want to congratulate you, and obviously I know your parents very well. So I want to congratulate them also, because this is amazing to see the way they've raised you. Also your pronunciations. I love the way you were reciting the verses. The Sanskrit and the way you were reciting the shlokas was so perfect. Like it was just it was so nice to just hear you reciting the verses. So I was very happy with those 2 things, that you could touch such a complex philosophical subject and you could recite so nicely. So congratulations on that. I think going back to your class, I loved certain points. Like I like that point you made about knowledge, like actual knowledge has to be accessible by all civilizations. It should not just be restricted to a few people. I love that point. Also, it has to be the root of worldly and non-worldly subjects. I think that was a very powerful point. I didn't realize that Vedic Sanskrit and Lokik Sanskrit is different. So that was, I learned many things in your class today, but that was something that I had not heard before. So that was very nice to learn. And I loved where you brought up that point about the circular argument, and that if the Vedas need another source to prove that they are the authoritative scripture, then they won't be authoritative. The other source would be authoritative. So I thought that point was very nice as well. So I'm just super impressed. I'm a very proud uncle today to watch the way you gave the class. I learned so much from you. So yeah, like everyone else said, you should come back and you should give more classes. I have one just general question. I guess based on what you presented today, especially like the Vedas being the root of worldly and non-worldly subject matter, when you interact with, I'm going to say kids, you're not a kid obviously, but when you interact with kids of your age, like boys and girls, even if they're not from Indian background and stuff, just this whole concept of, Vedic knowledge being the root of everything that we have today, right from even languages and everything. What do you think will be, or maybe you've already experienced this, like what do you think is the biggest problem with people of your age to accept this information? What have you seen as the biggest hurdle?
Perhaps I think with children, so it's actually easier, I would say, with children than it is with adults. Because with kids that are closer to my age, they have more of a clean slate. As adults, many of us start forming, and me at this point of my life as well, we start forming opinions and we don't want to back away from those. So it is very important that is why we start off our educational system with the younger grades and generations, because we're trying to form these concepts into their minds as young as possible, so that we're not dealing with some kind of rigid mindset later in life. Now that said, I would say the biggest hurdle when it comes to I guess children my age, when they're trying to understand these concepts, is that they're surrounded in a very particular environment, and they often hear a lot of information regarding the contrary to what we are saying. For example, I have many friends that are in Christian backgrounds, as just an example, and they'll go off of what they're hearing lifelong rather than what some random 15-year-old is coming up and telling them, right? So that is the biggest hurdle when it comes to that. However, we should try to speak to people the way that they are brought up. Srila Prabhupada did this when he came to the West. He wasn't talking to Vedic scholars when he was coming here and preaching. He was talking to young boys and girls who were trying to look for a higher purpose in this world. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that we should be looking for these kind of people to introduce this Vedic knowledge to, because they are the ones that will accept it when they are looking for something. Krishna has given 4 classes of people that approach him, and one of those are the inquisitive, those that are seeking to learn. So as far as when it comes to children my age, I would say it's perhaps it is hard in its own way, trying to give this knowledge. But if there are those individuals that are seeking this knowledge in the first place, then, only then, we should preach to them. So that is all I can say in this regard.
Hey, thank you. And please come back again.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for a wonderful question and wonderful answer by Vijay Krishna Prabhu. Anyone else? I know Anirudh Prabhu, Vinay Prabhu, they're all scholars. If anybody wants to unmute and ask anything or just say anything, please. Karan Prabhu, Vishal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. This is Anirudh Prabhu here. This is Anirudh here, sorry. Today's session was, absolutely genius. I really loved your articulation, your rendition, your presentation, logic. It's very clear that you're a very empowered devotee, and I really look forward to seeing you grow as a powerful preacher and to change millions to come towards Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I'm really proud, and honestly, it's very, very amazing to see you speak like this. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, and thank you for all the kind words once again.
I just want to add one thing here. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned that it's going to be the 3rd generation of devotees who are going to really take this movement to the next level. So just hearing you speak, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, I'm so proud, and I have complete faith in the words of Srila Prabhupada that it is going to be the 3rd generation devotees who are really going to spread this wonderful wisdom of Krishna consciousness through all the 3 worlds. I mean, I'm just so happy and so proud at this point. So thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Prabhu. Everyone said like all the glorious words for Prabhu, and those are all true. Thank you so much, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, for your wonderful class. I have been hearing all the pramanas and like through the device classes, but getting to know the like Shastra and the quotings behind them was really amazing. And yeah, like I hope I'm not like honestly, I'm not exaggerating, but I can see very young Radhika Raman Prabhu or Amarendra Prabhu in making through you. So please keep doing what are you doing and serving the Srila Prabhupada's great mission. Yeah, we look forward to hear more from you. And kudos to you, Jai. And it's like my prayers and obeisances to your parents as well, because of whose prayers and bhakti you are like able to grasp so much from the early age. So yeah, Hari Bol.
Thank you.
Very well said, Vinay Prabhu. Very well said. His parents are glorious. Ram Vijay Prabhu. In fact, I've been getting a lot of messages on the chat asking who are this 15-year-old's parents, and they're my close friends Ram Vijay Prabhu and Lalita Madhavi Mataji, who's also on this Zoom call. So thank you so much and to such wonderful parents for training Vijay Krishna Prabhu so well. Darshan Prabhu has a question.
His grandmother is also here. Just FYI.
Haribol, Haribol, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Welcome, Mataji, for being here. Aapko kuch bolna hai? You want to say something? We can't hear you, Mataji. We can't hear you. No.
I think mute. She's on mute.
She's unmuted, Prabhu.
Oh, she's on mute.
Okay, maybe we can. I just want to translate what Mataji said. She's very proud that he spoke on all the 4 Vedas, and she's very confident that once he becomes a little older, he's going to do some amazing things in life. So thank you so much. And
The way he simplified it is very complex topic, but he made it so easy to understand, and means can't believe it and feeling proud of him.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Very true, very true. He's made all of us proud, and he'll continue doing this. So all our prayers and blessings and love are with Vijay Krishna Prabhu. Thank you. Darshan Prabhu.
Yes, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, feeling so proud of you, seeing you as a kid and seeing this amazing class. Each and every point you mentioned was so precise, so perfect. It left no questions for, no room for any questions from my end. Just wanted to congratulate you and may Krishna bless you and give you all the empowerment to continue on this journey. And may you always continue to bring more and more souls to Krishna consciousness and making us and your parents proud. Amazing job. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Vishal Prabhu, you want to say a few words?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I just feel very grateful, and I really genuinely want to thank you for coming tonight and enlightening us. I just feel like 15 years is just a number, because I feel you are eternally young and descended from spiritual world to enlighten us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Very well said, Vishal Prabhu. So Vrinda Mataji, Shreya Mataji, if you want to say anything.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I think everyone said such lovely things about you. And so you might not know, there's a little girl Rohini from ISV, and she usually has to leave at 6:30, but she was so impressed, and like literally she loved it. Like both of us loved it, but we were constantly discussing in the chat that you have such great pronunciation, and I think that's the main part that I love. Pronunciation, the way you speak every word. That's amazing. And content, of course, it was so good that I can't even start appreciating it. So just thank you for just being the person you are. Thank you, Prabhuji. Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol. So Shreya, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, echoing what everyone said, literally, this was mind-blowing, knowing your age and just the way you've presented, your logical reasoning. Wow, just amazed. I really don't have words. I am going to send this recording to my sister and really make her watch this, just so that she can learn even the basics of presentation, not even the knowledge. She's very young right now, like 6th grader, so she probably won't get the logic, but Oh my God, such a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. Please come back again. Would love to hear you again.
Thank you, Shreya. It was very well said. So I just want to add a few things, maybe one quick question, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, and then we can end. So Tattva Sandarbha, as you know, has two divisions. One is the Pramāṇam, which you talked about today. And the other one is the Prameya, which is the object of this knowledge. And interestingly, Jiva Goswami, in all his future books after this Tattva Sandarbha, talks about Krishna. And in the Krishna Sandarbha also, he talks about how Krishna is the object. And so that's also a very, very important aspect. I just wanted to comment so that others understand that it's not just, Tattva Sandarbha is not just about the Pramāṇam, it has the Prameya also. The second thing I wanted to ask you was, you established very clearly the power of the Vedas, the authenticity of the Vedas. You proved it so nicely. I wanted you to highlight a little bit about the purports of our acharyas and the importance of the purports. If you can share a little bit, just for the benefit of all of us, why is it important? And it's coming from someone in this world. Of course, the Vedas are there, but the purports and their commentaries, why are they important? Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And the commentaries, the bhashyas, the tikas given by our great acharyas, whether that be Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami or that be any other of our great acharyas, we can view the Vedas as a closing gate. And that gate has almost closed for all of us. But the acharyas are holding those doors open and letting us walk through. How? Because of their commentaries. It is quite difficult for us to understand the verses within the Vedas or within Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, any literature we're talking about, simply by itself. It is like a lock that needs opening. And the great scholars, the great acharyas within our sampradaya are those that are holding the keys and are unlocking that for us. So if we wish to understand the full juice that is within every single verse, I myself I believe the version of the Tattva Sandarbha I was reading was also had a commentary done on it. And with that, I was able to understand more about the verses than what I could have tried to share with you here alone. So that said, for example, Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada has written an amazing commentary. And reading Bhagavad Gita by itself is good, but one will not understand the full meaning of Bhagavad Gita simply by reading it. That is why Srila Prabhupada has spent his life's mission writing that commentary. And it is all of our duty to simply pick up the book and read. So that is what I will say in this regard, that the commentaries on all the verses, they are like the keys to unlocking the full nectar that is within each and every one of these verses.
Beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. It was wonderful. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll just share some announcements.